Welcome to Art Talk Tuesday, episode 8. As you can see this morning, I'm here standing in front of 3 pieces. They are all part of a series entitled Addiction. I refer to these as a triptych, not in the traditional sense. In a traditional triptych, you would see 3 panels that would make up one image or one scene. In a diptych, you would see 2 panels that would make up one image or one scene. This is a non-traditional triptych. I call it a triptych because even though the panels depict different images, they're all interrelated and the images combined to give one overall picture of the theme, and that is the idea or the theme of addiction. So that's why I'm calling it a triptych. I'm going to jump right in and really start talking about this. Obviously, addiction is a very potent and sensitive issue. Unfortunately, I've seen addictions ruin too many people's lives. I can think of at least 3 people right now who are struggling with addiction issues, and it's not going well. Also, just in my family, I've seen it ruin lives in my family and other people's families. It's a serious thing, a serious issue. All of us have addictions in some way, in some form. Some people's are more obvious and visible than others, but we all have them. We have those repeated patterns that are not serving us, that are not helping us, whether they're patterns of thought, putting ourselves down internally all the time, thinking that we're not good enough, whether it's the use of drugs and substances. There's something. Some of us are even addicted to exercise. It can happen. And so really struggling with that. Even myself, I'm a recovering person. Many of you don't know that, but I am a recovering person. And these images were birthed out of that experience of my own recovery and just watching what happens in the lives of others. Some people never get it together as well as I have, and some people do. But you got to keep trying because you can. I'm no more special than anybody else, and everyone can do it. You just have to make the sacrifices and do the work. And so here we are, not alone. You always have to have some help. So these pieces going to give you the breakdown. These 2 on the outside are both 22 by 30, 22 inches wide by 30 inches high. This middle piece is slightly smaller in the frame dimensions. It's actually 22 by 28, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to kind of give a shrinking feeling. If you look at the 3 together, you see this one kind of shrinks in the middle, so you get this shape going. And we'll talk about this. So even though there are 3 pieces, I'm going to talk about each one individually because I believe it merits its own discussion. So this week I'll only be talking about the first piece in this series, and then next week I'll talk about the middle and the end. But just to give you a kind of overview, because they're all interrelated, so some things that I'll say, you need to kind of see the whole series together and see all the pieces as things will reflect back and forth as we go through the next 3 weeks. So the first piece is entitled Addiction. Second piece is entitled Withdrawal. Third piece is entitled Hope. So that gives you kind of overview of where we're going with this. This piece was actually inspired about 10 to 12 weeks into my real official recovery. I got involved with the feedback group that was sponsored and regulated, moderated by a counselor, psychologist, and also was doing some the abuse meetings, some of the free meetings, doing some other things, and just really going through it, trying to get it together. And about 10 weeks in, I got the inspiration for this image. At that point, I was actually able to begin to kind of feel like I could create again and getting some kind of sense of equilibrium and balance where I could kind of put something out. So that's where this piece came from. Obviously, from the title, it's entitled Addiction, playing around with a lot of things here. Obviously, the whole idea of addiction being a fire, of a flame, this burning. Many of the things that people do under the influence of addiction is not necessarily things that are done actually because of the addiction, but it's actually more to escape withdrawal or the pain of the withdrawal. Those are some of the times when some of us are most not ourselves or the people we know, out of our character. And so anyway, going with addiction here, we see this whole idea of the flame. If you notice that the flame is surrounding the figure and it's emanating up out of the figure. I wanted that to be on purpose. I purposely also, you see that this whole figure is faded to emphasize the idea of the flame. So what I've done was I purposely laid in some very light washes here and kept the background very light of the figure because I wanted to emphasize the flame, the burning, that burning sensation. And so you see here the figure has his head down. He's bent, writhed over in what could be considered pain or prayer. We don't know. I wanted to leave it purposefully ambiguous in that way. Is Is he in pain or is he praying? It's probably a little bit of both in my experience. You can't see the face. I wanted that to be on purpose, to leave it ambiguous. Head down, sign of dejection, low self-esteem, feelings of shame, guilt are very big when we're talking about issues around addiction. Nobody wants to admit that things are not right with them, to admit that they are not in control anymore of what's going on in their lives or themselves. And so this whole idea of shame and guilt, all these are wrapped up in this image here. And so I want to portray that hands on the head, this whole idea of pain emanating out here. And so the figure himself is burning. You see I use the colors, mostly reds and yellows, but I did throw a little bit of orange in here, but I actually wanted it to mix itself, which a lot of the paint did, just doing a really wet technique and keeping the board really wet, keeping the paper really wet, and so letting these reds and yellows kind of merge themselves in. There's probably about 15 to 16 layers of paint on these. It may not seem like it, but it really is. I have a technique that I can use that allows me to put more layers of paint on the watercolor, because really with watercolor, if you start putting too much heavy paint or too many layers, it can start to get gray and everything gets kind of muddy and shallow. But with this technique, I'm able to put more layers of paint on, which gives it a more luminescent quality. If I had to really put some varnish on the top of this, it would even pop it out more. So we have these mingling of the colors here, symbolic of flame burning. If you know anything about flames, you know that an impure flame is red and yellow and the orange. A pure flame is blue, and we'll talk about that later as we go on in the coming weeks. The black here symbolizing stillness, the unknown, fear, okay, of what cannot be seen, what cannot be known, what's on the other side of this experience. Just the blackness of feeling heavy and down and not knowing what's going on. So that's what's going on with this piece. This whole series, each piece is valued at $1,300. I have prints available on my website starting at $35 and up, but that's what's going on with addiction here. Hope you enjoyed this discussion, and I will see you next week. Be well.